Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taco Movie Talks. This is week 7, episode 7, and we had a hell of a week for sure. As you can see from this title screen, the majority of the movies we're going to be talking about are horror, and that matches the theme that both Ethan and I followed for the video that is now up. So if you want to check that out as well, we talk about Suspiria and A Chinese Ghost Story. The only non horror movie discussed for this week is The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser, which certainly will like to get into, but there is without a doubt a star studded cast of movies here on the title screen, as you can see. Probably one of your top movies is on this board. I think you might be surprised which one ends up being my favorite for the week. Without further ado, let's jump into the first movie that we're going to cover, and that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Charlie Kaufman, which was premiered in 2020. This is on Netflix. For those who have not had a Charlie Kaufman experience, he is very, very unique in his writing. Adaptation was my first, or I guess my introduction for lack of a better term, which is very, very thought provoking, very profound in its plot and how it goes about things. And the method of storytelling that he uses can be maybe a little confusing, but if nothing else, is certainly unique. And I do think that it is very effective, and that is true in this movie as well. I'm Thinking of Ending Things kind of starts out as a movie in which our main character is traveling with her boyfriend, who she's only been dating for 6 or 7 weeks, as she puts it, to meet his family. And she feels pretty conflicted because she's not sure this is a relationship that is going to last. And things aren't too weird on the trip there, although we are very much in the mind of the protagonist. But as we get to the childhood home of the boyfriend, this is where things start to really pick up in terms of the weird uniqueness and the wackiness. Although I think there's a negative connotation to those descriptors. It's different, and the method of storytelling is that of which the characters are very much caricatures, or the parents are, and the boyfriend is, and even our main protagonist is. It's as though, and this was something that I was starting to pick up on as I was watching, is that it seemed as though it was a memory. And as with memories, they can be very much exaggerated when we recall them. And that is kind of how the characters seem to be during the dinner scene. And then after dinner is when things start to pick up even more so. And it seems as though time is passing, or as I think the protagonist puts it, is time is flowing through the parents, and she is kind of at a set point in time, and they are kind of passing her by in different time periods, which for my memory, that I don't really recall many movies doing something like this. There probably are a good handful of examples, but this was really unique, very creative, and pretty cool. And it kind of led to the epiphany, I believe, on our main protagonist, that the, I guess, so called motivations of her boyfriend and why he was so attracted to her, and that she wasn't content with just being that for him, where she, I guess, kind of wants more of an even relationship and not where she plays just the role of an admirer of her significant other. So that was really interesting. And then we leave there. There's much discussion over the events that transpired. And then we get to a stop where they go to, I guess, another name for a Dairy Queen. I'm not sure if that is an actual location where they went for ice cream, but there's a pretty odd discussion between our main protagonist and a worker there, and then there's two other workers there who seem to ridicule the boyfriend, and it was as if all three of the workers there knew the boyfriend fairly intimately. And then we finish at the high school of the boyfriend, and this is where I kind of was like, What the hell just happened?" It really it left me in a sense like, what is going on? And delving into spoiler territory now, we have a character throughout who is a janitor at the school that we keep cutting to. And I think as the movie progresses, we seem to find further ties between the boyfriend and the janitor. It seems as though the janitor is the boyfriend in present tense. And we are replaying memories as he sees them. I guess of women that he's loved. It's perhaps a little bit like girlfriends of or ghosts of girlfriends past esque, at least my interpretation and the way that I took it. And I tried to stay away from other explanations to kind of have my own unique take on this. And if it is way off base, let me know in the comments. Certainly, even if you've never seen it and you are now listening to the spoiler territory, trust me, watch it for yourself. I don't think there's much of a takeaway, and you could very, very well come away with a different conclusion than the one that I came to, which is what makes this movie so brilliant. Is that I as far as rewatchability, it might be top tier when it comes to that because you, or at least speaking for myself, very much am looking forward to rewatching this just to kind of see if there's any more clues to figure out quite what this story was because it was elusive in a way without taking away from any of the enjoyment. So it definitely has that going for it, but it almost seems like the school is either the physical location of where this man is now, or if this is kind of the epicenter of his mind and memories. So in doing that, it's it's a very, very cool movie, very thoughtful, thought provoking, kind of a head trip for sure, as Charlie Kaufman is one to do, and definitely one that I would recommend. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was very well shot for another thing. The dialogue is very, very good. It's almost more snappy on a tit for tat rapport level, and also thought provoking as it was an adaptation. It seemed like Charlie Kaufman kind of stepped his game up as far as actual conversational dialogue because when I first watched him, the conversational dialogue was by no means boring. It was actually quite impressive, but it seemed to lean more into this is thought provoking dialogue as opposed to kind of Quentin Tarantino esque, just very snappy dialogue. He's able to mix the two very well in this one, in comparison to adaptation. Definitely looking forward to watching more of him. Syndicate New York is definitely one that I want to check out. So that once that's available on streaming services, that's one I'm definitely going to check out. But again, 4 to 5 stars. Give this one a view. Moving on, we have my first foray into Dario Argento, who is without a doubt a very unique director. He has a keen sense for what keeps us on edge, for what creeps us out, bugs being one of them, and that is a huge, huge, huge part of this movie. And there's also a monkey in this, which basically is a part of the cast, which is very unique. You don't see that too often. Uh, I knew immediately this was going to be a different kind of movie when I saw a monkey. But we have a girl who travels abroad to be at school as she begins to uncover her. I think she had always known she had powers, but was able to kind of push them to the limit as she was driven to find out who a murderer is. Very similar to Suspiria. I think I prefer Suspiria to this one, although you will find a lot of the same elements in this one that you will appreciate in Suspiria. Gut wrenching scenes, the mystery is kept pretty much throughout, which will keep you engaged in the whole movie. I think the ending possibly could have been stronger plot wise, although as far as the action taking place, it's pretty strong. Where you're definitely not going to lose interest in the ending while it is unfolding. But I don't know. That maybe if there was something, I think Suspiria had that the reveal was probably more enjoyable or more fulfilling than this. Although I the ending is going to be hard to predict. It isn't quite as enjoyable because it didn't. I feel like my words are coming down too hard on the ending, but it doesn't properly unfold to where this is like an ending that makes the most amount of sense where you're like, "Oh, there was so many clues coming into this and maybe I just missed them." But there's tons of horror aspects when it comes to gross out and violence. So, in that, it is a very enjoyable horror movie. I gave this one 3.5 stars out of 5. Definitely one to check out. And Dario Argento, as you will hear or have heard from the video with Ethan, is definitely a director that I am very much liking and wanting to check out more. So, on to the next movie. We have Audition by Takashi Miike, I believe is how you would pronounce that. 1999. This is wow. It sets the table perfectly, and the main dish is damn good. When we get to the ending, all the build up, everything properly being revealed is a hell of a journey. This movie, I think the best way to discover would be a man has an audition to find a new wife. In doing so, he picks a woman who, over time, he begins to unveil her traumatic past. And now I'm going into spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen this out, this is a Japanese horror classic that I think is very tastefully done. There are some disturbing and graphic moments, But if you can suffer through that or enjoy that in horror movies, you will certainly love it in this. So be sure to check it out. I watched this on Tubi, which is a free streaming service that you can use to watch this. Do that for sure if that sounds interesting to you whatsoever. But back to spoiler territory, our main character unveils her traumatic past, which has led her to torture and dismantle people around her since she lost her main coping mechanism, and that was ballet. And in the end, we have the main character get his almost both feet sawed off with a type of garrote type sewing, not sewing mechanism, but it uses friction to cut through bones, which is horrifying. And he is only saved by his son, who had kind of been pushing him to find someone new. And we go through her past in great detail to kind of see what trauma has pushed her towards this point. We find she is disciplined rather severely, or I guess you could say more or less tortured by her ballet teacher, not treated well by her step parents, not treated well by her mother. All of these things very much lead her to become this horrifying character in the end. There is certainly something terrifying about when our perceived image of what a sociopath, psychopath, demented killer looks like does not match what it is truly in films or in real life. Take Ted Bundy, for example. Take Christian Bale in American Psycho, for example. These are all great examples of when a charming, handsome, or beautiful in this circumstance, as many people would find the antagonist objectively good looking, or at least that is why the main character chooses her, along with a little bit of trauma bonding as well. I think is probably the main issue, but I think the looks of her certainly contributed. Which and if I'm missing the mark on this, because it did seem to try to make a point that her backstory was the thing that made her stand out, but I also think that she looked like the type of woman who was mature for her age, who was prim and proper, who was well behaved, that kind of fit all the criteria of what he wanted. And all of the red flags that he saw in other people, he was able to overlook in this character for one reason or another, which is kind of to look, nobody's perfect. You kind of want to choose the flaws that make us human, as opposed to the ones that make us inhuman. In that it's like it's not that trauma on its own, but if someone who speaks so flippantly about life being meaningless, those types of things can perhaps be a red flag that this person is not valuing things the same way that you do. They don't have truly the same values. And there was definitely a lot of picadillos in the other women that our protagonist was just able to basically overlook them for, but he became, I guess, fascinated or obsessed or very much interested in this character for one reason, and was giving her all the benefits of the doubt despite things that may have jumped off the paper on other people. Very good movie, scary in the sense like if you luckily I'm not planning on online dating for the rest of my life. I have a girlfriend who I very much love. If you are online dating though, this is a movie that I think will frighten you very, very much. I think it could be very effective from that standpoint. But I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. It's amazing. Definitely one to check out. If any of the things that I said at the beginning are interesting to you, it will very much uh, be the movie for you. Moving on, we're going to go over The Evil Dead, the first of a tremendous series of which I've watched now 1 and 2 and the remake. So only the third movie is left to be watched. And this one is amazing in very, very unique ways. So beautifully over the top, a masterpiece of cinematography. This is a movie that could you could lose appreciation for it if you're not looking at it through the right lens, I think. To some people, the over the top nature might be a turnoff, but I think if you certain horror fans are just going to connect with this immediately. I am one of them. This one spoke to me on a different level. The fact that Evil Dead 2 is able to take where we take this movie and then one up it is absolutely astounding because this movie is so good. I think directors very rarely are able to hit this level of quality. So for it to be the start of a series is very understandable, but for the sequel to outdo it, in my mind, is even more astounding. The makeup is top notch. The cinematography, as I said, is really, really damn good. The plot is simple and brilliant, so genius as a whole. There is so much to cling on to. There is so much to like about this. This is truly a classic horror movie. And if you're a horror fan, definitely dip your toe into this. It might not be for you. I think some people might find it comical, but it is entertaining to the max. And if it's not for you, that is completely fine. But I think for the majority of people who really enjoy horror movies, this one is going to be one you are very glad that you have seen. I'm very much looking forward to watching the I believe it's Army of Darkness, and to borrow a quote from my letterbox review. Sam Raimi doesn't just color outside the lines; he splatters the canvas with blood. And then I went on to say that he is like the love child of Jackson Pollock and Ted Bundy. That's my sales pitch. If it's not enough to get you to watch it, I don't know what will be. This is another 4 out of 5 stars for me. I'm going to link my letterbox profile down below. I have a list of all the horror movies that I have watched and rated. So after this, I think it would be a great idea to check out the list to kind of give an idea of what I find best to see which ones you perhaps hadn't seen that you might want to check out in the future. But this one is definitely high up there because it is a very, very brilliantly done and executed movie. So 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely check this one out. Next is Nightbreed by Clive Barker. And this is, in a sense, I the only comparison that this would have to the movie I'm about to mention would be that it felt like there was the materials on the table to build something great, but it didn't quite get there. And if you've watched some of my earlier reviews, I think you might know that I'm going to compare this to Dracula from the sense that there was a lot of good that could have built into great, if not amazing. There's two main plots here that are interesting on the face. They did not feel developed enough to get us invested. We have one of a very unique, neat serial killer, and then we have one of kind of an underground city in which like a different type of human or like a moon creature, I think is what they were, lives. But neither one is given enough detail for us to become fully invested and for us to give it a full appreciation. Because I think if you were to really flesh this out, you would become very, very interested in one or the other. And I don't know, maybe a 2-hour runtime just isn't enough to put that type of detail into either one. Maybe just the way the story was laid out made that the case, or maybe it just should have been separated into two movies because they are very. I mean, I don't know. I don't think the serial killer angle works without having a kind of motivation. But on top of that, the motivation isn't very fleshed out for the serial killer as well. The makeup is good, the action is really good, and that's kind of all I have to say about this. It's a shame that it didn't turn out better than it did. Some people very, very much like this. They said on a second viewing they were able to appreciate it even more. I think I'm going to take my time getting back to this one, but I think I will check it out again. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. It has enough good going for it that I had to push this one above average. It's not it is enjoyable. So don't get that twisted, but I think there are certainly countless more options that you could jump to. Hellraiser, if you're a Clive Barker fan, but it just in horror in general, there is so much more to cling on to. The plots are unique. I just kind of wish they would have been developed more. And that is my final verdict on this one. Next, we have Tucker and Dale versus Evil by Eli Craig. This is a neat horror comedy mix up, very much entertaining the whole way through. The humor was good in that it made us laugh. It is the story of this kind of the woods or the cabin itself being the evil, so to speak. There's an evil presence there, which gets our main characters, Tucker and Dale, mixed up in the teenagers staying fairly close to their vacation home, essentially just self annihilating all around them and kind of painting the picture for so from a different perspective it would look like they are like hillbilly murderers, the likes of the Texas Chainsaw family, which is a very unique flipping of the premise of countless horror films on its head. And I guess my only critique was that it kind of stays on that premise. It hangs on to that very much, and that is the most intriguing part throughout. And by the end of the movie, that premise is kind of worn thin, and we do have a twist ending of sorts, but one that you might see coming because of how the movie starts, which, and getting into spoiler territory, the antagonist is pretty much alluded to throughout the movie, but we get his backstory that kind of pushes him into full on evil, in that his true biological father was one who was killing teenagers 20 years ago to kind of make this hallowed ground so evil. That's the twist. Don't get me wrong, this movie is interesting the whole way through. I can see why people really love it, but I feel like there could have, I don't know. I don't know if there could have been more, but there it just started to droop near the end. The premise starts the movie off very in a funny manner. The humor doesn't really take a step down at any point. But to keep it interesting the whole way, I can kind of see why it transitioned. But I guess maybe perhaps the second half or the ending premise isn't quite as strong as the first one, and maybe the the comparison that you're going to naturally make through watching this movie is what makes it stand out as not being so great. This one probably could be bumped up as far as my rating goes, but I initially put this at a 3 out of 5 stars. By all means, a lot of people find this to be a great movie, so do check it out. I think maybe to put this most concisely is that it uses the same tropes that are very formulaic and very much played in a lot of horror movies, because it's able to do so with the turning it on its head. But as that starts to wear out, those tropes are, you're just using all of the same tropes. You see, it 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 doesn't make it unique enough to where it becomes so fresh and so new the whole time through. I guess that was maybe the one thing, takeaway, I guess, that I had coming out of this. But again, check it out because a lot of people really do like it and find it to be great. And I'm sure you probably would too, or maybe you would agree with me. But I would like to hear, for those of you who have seen it, what you thought about this movie. Moving on, we have Peeping Tom, which is 1960, Michael Powell, and this one is absolutely terrific. As with a lot of these old horror classics, it's the type of plot where you're like, lucky him to be able to unveil this plot first. It's a horror masterpiece as far as simplicity of plot and effectiveness of plot. And I think I mean, it allows the director to really flesh it out, because it's probably, being a filmmaker, he's very much familiar with this character, and we really get a fleshed out motivation from the perpetrator of the murders that are taking place in this film. For big horror fans, this is a must see. It does not age almost whatsoever. It looks beautiful. It is beautifully shot, as you would expect about a movie who is about a murderous filmmaker. I don't know if you could recommend a movie that came prior to this that is better, because it holds up so stinking well. It's a very good Hollywood movie, as some people like to kind of get a sense of what Hollywood was like in the early 60s and late 50s. I didn't think this one would live up to the hype. It certainly did. It is a true horror masterpiece that I am unsure if enough people have gotten exposure to it yet. So let this be the recommendation to check this out. I don't want to give too much away because I do want people to give this one a view because this one made it very high up my list. I believe it's top 10, and I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. Trust me on this one, it is great. Great performance from our I guess antagonist. Great shots, very beautifully done. The story unfolds at a great pace, and everything is kind of properly explained. Not very much, if anything, is not thought through. So, from that perspective, this is just very intricately and tediously done to make this as great as it was. And it is a must see for any horror film fan. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Please check it out. And last but not least, we have the Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. Let me just say this: Werner Herzog is a beautiful, not looking, but director in that he can find the beauty in shots and in stories that very few directors are capable of finding. He is so capable in doing that. It is the story of a man who is very much isolated for the majority of his life, or so we are led to believe. Not that that is a twist, but he's able to develop very quickly after he is brought to town by his father slash caretaker for the last few years. It was kind of a situation where the mother had passed away. The courts gave custody of this son to a father who is now remarried. And in trying to keep it a secret, he basically locked Casper away. But it's a story where we see the progression of Casper from having no sense of knowing how to walk, knowing how to properly speak, knowing how to properly write, to becoming a very thoughtful character who has this very much outside of the box thinking process to the point where he's able to rival professors of the time. It's a very, very unique story. It's very well told, wholesome in its feel, and sad in its ending, as it seems like it was the type where people are kind of scared of what they don't understand, or maybe it was the father being scared of this person that he had kind of done such wrong to be able to be alive and tell his story. But it's it's so unique. I'm a big fan of Werner Herzog. This is my sixth film of his that I've watched. There are beautiful shots. They're probably not piped in quite as much as you would find in other films of his, but nonetheless, they are still there and they are still great. I mean, Werner Herzog's ability to paint these characters who are so unique in motivation. They are so much to the extremes of human nature. I think that is what attracts him and what very much propels him to direct and tell stories. This is a great example of this as well. So, if you're a fan of his or you want to dip your toe into Herzog, this is a great one to start. This is a very well done movie. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5. And I'm definitely looking forward to continuing to wade through the catalog that Werner Herzog has to offer. So, those are all of the movies. Be sure to like and subscribe. I was able to get a very good head start on the movies that I will be reviewing next week. And just to give you a few of those, if you want to watch them as or before next week's movie comes out, you can also check out my letterbox to see movies as I review them. Anyone done in the week is going to be reviewed either that week or the next week, as with this scenario. But there is Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, Golgo 13, Golgo 13, The Professional, Wild Strawberries, and The Beyond. Dipping me toe into 3 very well known directors in Fulci, in Berman, in Siamano, I believe is how you would pronounce that. Let me just double check that real quick. Because he is the director Semino. I know I'm mispronouncing that. Sound off in the comments. Yell at me, please. Is much deserved. But again, be sure to like, subscribe, comment recommendations, comment your thoughts on any of the movies covered. I very much appreciate anyone. If you made it this far, feels like we're best friends now, doesn't it? Probably listening to the sound of my voice this long. You either want to kill me or you probably want to listen to me more. So hopefully it's the latter, because there will be videos coming out each and every week, and you are now able to get a head start on next week's with those 4 movies. And follow me on Letterbox too, so you can check out movies that way and get a sneak peek of the review before the video comes out. Much appreciated, y'all. Thank you again for stopping by, and I will catch you on the flippity floop.